pressure on Russia. Joining me now, Texas Congressman and House Foreign Affairs Committee ranking member Mike McCaul. Congressman, you attended Zelensky's speech. Your initial reaction?
You know, it's very, very powerful, very emotional. And the video they showed of Ukraine prior to the invasion, a beautiful country, Kyiv, beautiful city, you know, with the families, and then post-invasion, the destruction and the loss of life, you know, throwing bodies into grave sites and, you know, children being injured and wounded and killed, and pregnant women. I mean, this is really devastating. And I got to tell you, Dagan, it really left a lot of members in tears watching this thing. We haven't seen anything really like this, I think, since World War II. You know, it made us more determined to help Ukraine fight the fight.
Congressman, I've heard people say that. I was listening to the news channel all day yesterday, but did people miss what happened in Grozny, Chechnya, at the hands of Vladimir Putin? Did they miss Aleppo in Syria? That this just is a bigger version of that, and it seems like that Putin's been planning something along these lines for 20-some-odd years. And we as a nation weren't, in terms of response and fortitude, prepared for it. And we still aren't in some ways.
Well, I think an excellent point, Dagan. I mean, he did this in Chechnya. In Syria, he actually dropped chemical weapons. I think one of my greatest concerns and fears as I get my briefings is that the more Putin gets desperate, the more desperate measures he will take. And chemical weapons is certainly in his playbook. And we worry that that's going to be the next shoe to drop as he gets more desperate. Remember, this is supposed to be over in 3 to 4 days. It didn't happen. And the reason he's breaking the will of the Ukrainian people, or trying to, I would argue not successfully, that's why they targeted a theater that had children, you know, painted, you know, on both sides, and they targeted that. They targeted a maternity hospital. Now he's going after civilians, women and children. It's really horrific, and he's done this before. And you know what? We have to have some red lines here. And if he pulls out chemical weapons or short-range tactical nukes, that is the worst nightmare case scenario that we need to be prepared for.
What about Zelensky's request? He called for the no-fly zone, but added, if not that, then, and he raised the issue of the S-300 surface-to-air missile system, an alternative, in Zelensky's words. It's a Russian-made weapon that Eastern European NATO countries have in stock. As the Wall Street Journal editorial page writes today, Ukrainians know how to operate it. The hang-up in providing this seems to have been U.S. reluctance to provoke Mr. Putin with certain high-profile weapons, and President Biden's refusal to assist with the transfer of the 28 Polish MiG fighters in Ukraine. But again, we do nothing because we worry about provoking Putin. Putin doesn't need provocation. He's gone in and he's gone into Ukraine and is attacking civilians, women and children. So will Ukraine, Zelensky and all of his fighters get the S-300 system? Yes.
I mean, the answer is yes. They have some. We are working with NATO and our coalition partners. They can take anything, any Russian-made weapon the Ukrainians are able to use. That's what they. We can't send them American stuff because they don't know how to use it. But they do know how to use Russian military equipment, and that's what they need. We should. To your point, though, Dagan, you're absolutely right. Last November, we had a weapons package that the president held up until right before the invasion. And it seems like, you know, we had to wait till after an invasion to start bringing weapons in. And it was ludicrous. Now, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is saying, well, gee, it's really hard to move these weapons in now because Russia's in there. Well, yeah, of course. Why weren't we doing this last November? He could have been fully armed before the invasion happened. he being President Zelensky. And this administration really failed in that. But having said that, the no-fly would put us in an immediate war with Russia.
Right.
It'd be World War III. What we're trying to do is give them, these armed drones that the Russians are terrified by, and the S-300, which is anti-aircraft, just like our Patriot battery system. I've been urging the administration to get these S-300s in. They're on their way. They are in country. But, it's almost like too little, too late. Imagine if Zelensky had this stuff before the invasion, both the deterrence and the ability to wipe out the Russians from day one. Now, having said that, they've lost 7,000 Russian soldiers in 20 days. To put that in perspective, that's more than we lost in 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. The death toll on their part and the body bags, I think, are going to play back home in Russia not very well for Mr. Putin.
Vladimir Putin clearly saw a world. He saw who his allies were, Congressman, that he knew that China would stand by and come to his aid, that that Saudi Arabia in some way would line up with China, creating a stronger axis, even a new axis of evil, if you will, but also watching the United States in the last year and administration that was focused on green energy and giving up our power and our dominance and our prosperity that was our energy economy. So we now, as a nation, can't step in as a swing producer and pump a couple of million more barrels of oil on the world market to help make up for sanctions against Russian oil that's come off the market. So Vladimir Putin clearly saw a Western world that didn't want to stand up to him or that wasn't financially capable to do so. And that's why Kyle Bass just said that we have only sanctioned 40% of Russia's gross domestic product. There's 60% that is not being sanctioned. And much of that is money that from energy, the sale of natural gas and oil that goes right to fund this war on Ukrainian men, women, and children.
That's exactly right. We talk about, these tough sanctions, but remember, Dagan, there's a carve-out exception for energy.
Right.
And that's because Europe is 40% dependent on Russia. In fact, we were importing Russian energy. I don't think a lot of Americans knew that. I'm glad we're not doing that anymore. But the fact is, if we can't produce energy at home and be energy independent and have to be relying on Venezuela and Iran and Russia, our foreign nation adversaries, what kind of energy policy is this?
It isn't.
And the idea, I led the charge in Congress and the House on the sanctions on Nord Stream 2,
yes,
and that is Putin's pipeline into Europe.
Right.
I took the presidential waiver out, bipartisan, and they killed that in the Senate. Why, how is that in the national security interest of the United States for President Biden to waive that and allow Putin's pipeline to go into Europe, just making the world more reliant on him? And that, to your point, it's his lifeblood, right? His lifeblood is energy. And he's using that to fund his war machine and his killing machine that's spilling blood all over Ukraine.
I said this a year ago when Joe Biden took office. I said, you're ceding our power and prosperity to nations that hate us by giving up our energy dominance and taking a hatchet to it. And I mentioned Vladimir Putin by name. You're handing him money and power on the world stage, and he's a tyrant, and he will use it. And he's using it against the Ukrainian people. And whoever didn't see this coming is a moron and should be ashamed of themselves. Congressman Mike McCaul, thank you so much. Great to see you. Please come back.
You're right, Dagan.